Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast for creators of any variety. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Y'all, I cannot have enough water to stay hydrated. Like, I just had a cup of Earl Grey tea and I'm wired. Like, that is not supposed to happen with Earl Grey tea. It's a third of the caffeine as a cup of coffee, and yet I am raring to go. This is where you can reach me now. This is not right. I'll just drink some aloe vera water because apparently we're drinking aloe now. Well, I have some exciting news. We are going to launch a newsletter, and it's not going to be about the podcast. It's about all this awesome stuff. We're going to talk about it at length in a couple of weeks, but I'm just excited to put it out in the universe now so that it has to happen. It has to. Also excited about today's episode. Our guest is Jess Salomon, a New York City comic I saw on The Tonight Show. She has a great origin story, like get the superhero treatment, an origin story. Here's my chat with Jess Salomon. I don't know if you've been getting this lately, but I found out about you because you were recently on The Tonight Show.
That's true. I haven't been getting a lot of podcast requests, like specifically since then, so... but definitely some messages and, some bookings and stuff, but it was a very exciting thing that happened.
Yeah.
And, my life is pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I think my mom now has a newfound respect for my comedy career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you get on The Tonight Show, then, that's a dawning moment for a lot of people. And you mentioned your mom, so we have to just get into it right off the bat. You haven't been doing comedy and performing since you were a little kid, and, this was a natural progression that your parents saw necessarily. You spent a good bit of time as a UN war crimes lawyer.
Yeah, that's right.
Before getting into comedy. So let's talk about it. You're not the first lawyer who went into comedy that I've interviewed, but you are the first UN war crimes one. This is a very serious type of lawyer that you or type of law that you practiced. How many years did you do that?
So yeah, I mean, it's not the typical trajectory, of course. Mm. And I thought, well, UCB seems to take a lot of time and it's pretty expensive. So maybe this would be a different route I should take. Why not? But I was a lawyer for like 3 years, I'd say, in total. I was a war crimes lawyer with the UN for 2.5 years and an intern before that at the same tribunal for like 3 months, and I worked in the Canadian Department of Justice for about a year as I was getting my bar. So I don't know, maybe 3.5 years total as like an actual lawyer.
Wow.
Licensed and all of that. And I know that there are other lawyers, and I think a lot of lawyers harbor ambitions and dreams of doing things outside of law, other than because a lot of them, tell me so. And, but I can see why there's sort of like law and comedy have some kind of overlap in terms of how people's brains work. Mm. But, certainly it wasn't something anyone suggested I do. I wasn't one of these comedians who have the story of like being funny in front of their friends and all their friends telling them they should do comedy. Like nobody told me I should do comedy. And, I didn't do a lot of the arts, acting or dancing or singing or any of that. previously. So I get why. Nobody was daring me to go up on an open mic or anything.
It is something that a lot of times when people start in a different field, they had an interest, but people saw maybe something there. You're saying that wasn't the case for you. So how did it become an interest?
I mean, I know that when I was a kid, I always enjoyed telling funny stories about my family and things that happened to me. And I mean, that's the only thing I can like look back and see that there was some kind of seed was I would get requests for to retell particular stories about my family from other students and from friends. And I think I was a funny kid, but I never really thought that comedy was like something. I just wasn't like on the radar as a potential profession. And when I was in college, I got really interested in human rights issues. I always cared a lot about inequality and justice in a broad sense. And then I got interested in human rights work when I started studying refugee issues in undergrad, and got turned on to this one law professor who was in Montreal at McGill, where I was from. And I wanted to work with him. I didn't necessarily want to go into law. I just wanted to do something good in the world and be part of the solution. And I knew that I did not have a stomach for blood or, to be a doctor or a brain for math to build wells anywhere or irrigation systems. And I knew I couldn't necessarily be like a forensic type of investigator. And so sort of being a little bit removed from the immediate horror of all of that, and just sort of being in the courtroom and dealing with law, which is a little bit more removed and after the fact, seemed like the place where I could maybe have an impact. And I liked words, so that seemed, reading and writing, it seemed so like something I could wrap my head around. And but it wasn't like I grew up either dying to be a lawyer necessarily.
Right. I'm sure a lot of people say, because they don't necessarily realize that not all lawyers are trial lawyers, but that's what everyone thinks when they think of lawyers.
Right.
And so I'm sure a lot of people say, oh, I can see how you could have some transferable skills because they're both public speaking. But like I said, it's not what everyone's doing when they're a lawyer. What I see is the main transferable skills, though, is that in both cases, you really have to be able to get to the crux of a matter and understand what's really going on and be able to sort of understand all the different sides of an issue in order to do the work. In law, it's in figuring out what happened so people can be tried appropriately. But in comedy, it's so that you can get to what people are feeling so that you can make them laugh about it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Definitely. I think that, the transferable mental exercise of law, which is getting to the heart of the, like, what's the issue in a case, and is similar to what's the funny in a scenario in comedy, what's the punchline. And it's also similar to what I think journalists do when they're thinking about what's the headline of a story. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at it for different reasons, but you're still able to kind of get to, the heart of what the thing is in a series of facts. So I think that kind of thing. And then, of course, like having skills about, being able to express yourself and get up and speak in front of people is obviously important. But there's a lot of things about law that would have that are not good for comedy. And you kind of, I feel like I've had to break away from.
Like what?
Like especially if you're in more of a diplomatic world, where I was, just I think too much nuance and too much qualification, being too careful. It doesn't work with words. Doesn't work well with comedy. I think comedy is better with just definitive statements. that then you kind of, back up with funny examples and stuff. But yeah, and kind of trying to, comedy can be a little bit absurd and thinking out of the box, and law is kind of the opposite of that. So those kind of things you have to kind of shed, and over time, if you spend enough time doing stand-up, your brain eventually becomes sick in the way that a comedian's brain gets sick, or some people already have it naturally, and you start to see the world like with a comedic bent. And that, I mean, I'm definitely there now, but it took, I mean, it's been 10 years. So I think, but there was a period of time where, and this is true of any career transition, where you're kind of a few years out of your former career. So you're not really good at that anymore, but you're only a few years into the new thing. So you're not really good at that. And that's like a very bad time.
Yeah, that has to be a really tough time. And let's jump right into talking about that. What helped you get through that time period? Was it just more reps, or did you have some sort of dawning moments that helped you sort of figure that out?
I mean, I think part of it was just I'm very kind of all or nothing, and I am very determined, and I just decided I'm going to keep doing this. And I think probably on some level because, well, number one, I liked it, and I wanted to get better at it, and I saw small, little increments of improvement, and you have those small little wins where you learn a new thing on stage, and you build a little bit more time. You have the first few jokes that work. That is very intoxicating. And I was also, I think, on some level determined to prove that I could do this. And so that drove me to keep doing it. And also, I think that it helps if you have a little bit of a sense of self and like some stability in other areas of your life, maybe like a partner that loves you, and this, that all of your self-worth isn't wrapped up in your job, because you don't have that much of that during those years.
Right. I mean, there's a lot that has to be going through your mind. For one, you left this position that, a lot of people are going to say, oh, good for you for having that job. So you leave that job for something like entertainment, which is a risky job regardless of where you're coming from. So, there's that, to a certain extent, had to have pushed you forward, because you said, hey, I made this transition. This has to work out. But I mean, it also has to affect your confidence when things aren't going as well. And like you said, you get to that place where you're not as good at the previous job, but you're not there yet on the new job. So you're in this headspace of, well, I can't go back, and I still need things to be better than they are.
Yeah.
That's got to really hit the confidence and ego really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps to be a little bit delusional, which most people have at the beginning of comedy, and it's important. I don't think any of us could do this without some level of delusion.
Right.
But yeah, there is a moment where I also realized that I couldn't go back to law. I mean, it would be very hard to, not just because I had lost touch with whatever was current in the profession, and had lost some of the sharpness and the skills and all of that, but just because, at a certain point you've put so much online, I've written so many things on Twitter and Facebook that, I mean, especially working for a bureaucracy, like whether the Canadian government or the UN, I mean, it would be maybe hard for them to take me back,
Right.
To be taken seriously, and like, God knows what, you'd have to erase a lot of stuff. So, because you're supposed to, when you work at those places, be an impartial type of person and not be expressing all kinds of jokes and opinions.
Right. Yeah.
I think, at some point you decide that this is it. And so, I realized that it would be very hard to go back. And, but I also just, I just really am persistent, and I really, love doing comedy. So, I just kept forging forward and didn't, I mean, let's say it's not like I made it. I had a very nice year and some really cool things happened, but, and those things definitely help. But before the Tonight Show, there's always there's other smaller little victories that keep you going.
And you do have a lot of great things on your resume that have to help with that. I do want to go back for a second and just ask, because it was passion that led you into law, but what passion led you into comedy?
The thing about law, the push factor out of it was that I didn't really love, working with law itself. At the end of the day, even though I was in the best area for me of law, because it was connected to politics and history, and I wasn't billing hours in a corporate law firm, and I enjoyed the international environment and worked with a lot of really funny people, and with a really dark sense of humor. At the end of the day, it was just felt kind of limiting. Law is, when you're writing law, it's its own language, and you're limited to sources of law, and there's a hierarchy there of what you're looking towards to solve answers. And I felt like I wanted to do something more creative. And I think that the push into comedy was that I was watching a lot of TV online. Luckily, it was available in The Hague, so I wasn't limited to just Dutch Grey's Anatomy. And one of the things I was watching a lot of was The Daily Show, and Jon Stewart at the time was having a real impact, in particular on the conversation, and he had gotten the show Crossfire canceled, and it seemed like in that moment that comedy could be a very effective tool for advocacy as well. So to me and I was also very inspired by my workplace and the idea of writing a sitcom that took, a dark comedy that took place at a war crimes tribunal. And so that was sort of what I wanted to do, was to write a show about where I worked, and that I would maybe be able to reach a much broader audience than I could as a lawyer, and expose people to what that world of international criminal law was. But I didn't know anything about comedy, so I didn't realize how long all of that took. So I left. I thought, well, I'll just take 2 years off, and if I don't make it, then no big deal. I'll just go back to law. No harm, no foul. If I don't have an HBO special and my own sitcom, well, then obviously it's not for me. So that's truly what I believe. Nobody, everybody else who doesn't know anything about comedy, you don't realize how long it takes and how hard it is. Because everybody does think, a lot of people do, think that they're just kind of funny, or they make people in their world laugh. So that was originally the impetus, was to write a sitcom based on my workplace, and to, I would do something like Jon Stewart, which was to have an impact by using comedy on a large segment of the population. Of course, things have taken a turn politically, and Jon Stewart is raising, rescued dogs and other animals on a farm, and Tucker Carlson is living his best white nationalist life. So big ratings. So I don't know that now my feeling about comedy saving the republic is the same. I think we've moved beyond that, and I do think that maybe the lawyers are the ones that are the most effective people right now at stemming the tide of fascism. But this is where I find myself. So, so here we are.
Yeah, here we are. And, like I mentioned, and you mentioned as well, that you've had a lot of things before the Tonight Show. You were in Just for Laughs and the Winnipeg Comedy Festival, and you're in Laughing Skull Festival. I'm from South Carolina, so not far from Atlanta. And always nice to hear Laughing Skull.
Yeah, I did that festival. It was still a competition then. I think maybe it was up until recently. And I was still pretty early on in comedy, but it was so I was eliminated probably immediately in the first round or whatever, but I was on a show with people who were amazing, and I loved Atlanta, and I've definitely been back since. I have done a show in Charleston with my wife, who's a comedian, and Charleston is South Carolina, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that was a beautiful place. We were only there so briefly, but I can't remember the name of the place.
Was it Theater
We did
99?
No, it was sort of like an old the Commodore. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I don't know the
like
Commodore.
it was a cool, almost like loungy, maybe music venue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, we did a show there, and it was a lot of fun. And then we drove from there to Atlanta and listened to a lot of Christian rock in the rental car.
You could have changed the channel if you needed
Well,
to.
part of the problem was, and my wife has a joke about this, that you don't really realize that it's Christian rock until like you're a few minutes into the song sometimes, because it just sounds regular, and then
Yeah.
it takes a turn. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the trick. If you
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
right. It's just sort of copy whatever's popular, and it's so many of the guitarists in Christian rock are just trying to sound like The Edge from U2 that
Yeah.
it can trick you there for a little bit.
Yeah. It took us a minute to clue in. We were like, this is nice. Oh, the person you're in love with is Jesus. Okay. So yeah, and then we drove to Atlanta, and actually that's where I ended up doing this NBC competition, the Stand Up NBC. It used to be called Stand Up for Diversity. Anyway, and that's where I did this process that where I met the booker for the Tonight Show was through that. He saw me during that process, and then a year later, I auditioned specifically for the Tonight Show. But it was only because of that NBC competition that he knew me at all. Yeah.
And you're saying process, and that's the first time I really noticed your Canadian accent.
Process, yeah, direction. I think the way we say pasta, drama.
Oh.
I think because I feel like in America people say more like taco and drama, like more of a pasta.
Do you not say taco?
I say taco, yeah, but I guess we say more and you guys. Some people here say more like
yeah. Taco, tacos, not taco.
Yeah.
I guess I'm overemphasizing.
Well, yeah, that's the little bit. I think those words are. We'll pick it up.
See. You have also worked on a sketch comedy show, Baroness Von Sketch, on IFC and CBC. So that was something that was airing in CBC, but also aired, I guess, in the States on IFC.
Yeah, it's such a funny show, and I had a little bit of time in the writers' room on the last season that hasn't yet aired. I think it's going to be airing. I don't know when the air date is. Hopefully soon. I know that they've shot it all, and I'm curious to see what, if any, of my sketches made it to TV. But it was really a dream. It was the first time I'd been in a writer's room, and I think it was not the typical experience in that it was like all women, I think, except for one guy who was great. And it was very supportive and regular, like hours, and just, I don't know, it was really kind of like a dream work scenario. And I think there are writers' rooms like that, but I know that might not be like the typical experience. Mm-hmm. And I hope to go back there. They have another season. They just haven't figured out when they haven't gotten the dates yet. So I hope to join them for another stint in their writers' room. But I am going to be, there's a Canadian show, but that doesn't air in the U.S. called The Beaverton, which is sort of like it's a Canadian political satire news show, and I'm going to be there working on an episode. There's going to be an election special in October, I'm getting to work on that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so I'm interesting.
Jon Stewart,
Yeah, he's waiting for a check, I guess, from you.
Yeah.
No, but That's interesting. I don't know much about sketch writing, like how that process goes outside of what I've read, all the things I've read about SNL. So I
Right.
didn't know that there were sketch shows where the writers would write a bunch of sketches and say like, well, I don't know what's going to get on. That's an interesting process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens on SNL, but it just happens within the week of that show.
It happens in a week. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this is in this case, the sketches are kind of topical in that it's like stuff that's in the zeitgeist.
Right. It's what's in the ether.
Yeah. And some of the sketches are political, but they're, zoomed out themes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so so you have their sketches are really short, and it's four women, the four baronesses, and they're all like in their 40s, and so it's like a particular style and demographic, and it's really funny, and it's not necessarily the voice of sketch that you might see typically. I guess there aren't really that many sketch shows, I should say, anyway. But my experience with sketch writing is limited in that I took 2 classes at UCB and learned the basics. And there they kind of teach you how to get a packet together for what SNL would want, which is like the things that you see on SNL: a political sketch, a commercial parody. And to, you think about who the actors are on SNL and who you cast and who normally does Trump and who normally, so you're writing for 4 women, sometimes with other kind of characters maybe supplementing, but it wouldn't be like a sketch where any of them are playing, Donald Trump or Sarah Huckabee Sanders or anything like that. And they don't really have commercial parodies or, parodies in the same way. But they parody a lot of things. Yeah, I guess that was it. It's a different style. So the packet that I'd written here in the US, for them, it was like a different application. It was just really to write sketches that look like would fit for those 4 women.
Right. Okay. And how long have you lived in New York?
Well, I've been here 3 years. I moved with my wife. She was the one that got the green card. She likes me to tell people that because she's Arab and I'm Jewish / white. So people usually assume it was me, but it was Obama who let us in, and we moved. Yeah, I guess it was April 2016, so 6 months before Trump came into power or was elected. And I think a lot of the things that make America not great do make it good for show business. And the things that make Canada a good country to live in maybe don't make it great for show business.
Interesting.
I think, yeah. So we moved here for show business. And in that sense, it has been really, really great. And we've had so many opportunities we would never have had if we had not been here.
Oh, awesome.
Even back home, because people care about you a lot more in Canada once you've moved to the U.S.
I've heard that in regard, I think maybe it was Martin Short. I can't remember. There are a few people who are from Canada who got big here who sort of pointed out that once you do well here, then you get more attention there. All of a sudden, the attention that they weren't giving you when you were there.
No, then it's like, well, you became famous in America, so now we're like proud to claim you and all that. But there is a tendency in the culture there isn't like a celebrity culture in Canada. And, and so they don't, there isn't a system to really there's not a star system to promote people. Like, I don't think we would ever have a reality show prime minister. We have a famous prime minister now, but because his father was prime minister, but he's not famous because of TV. Like, nobody could be famous enough in Canada to become a prime minister because they're famous. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just...
No, I get what you mean. I mean, like, Trump rose to where he rose because he was some big celebrity that people knew.
Yeah. And I know, I just don't feel like we could ever have a threat of that because there's no celebrities, unless
Right.
it was like Justin Bieber. But even then, I don't know that there's a premium placed on that, like in a positive way. There's this idea of the tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a Canadian thing, and I know that Australians say it as well. But basically, if one poppy grows taller than the others in the field, it needs to be cut down. No one should rise too high above everybody else. And like wanting to be famous and being very ambitious and being open about that is like looked down upon. Whereas here it's something that is valued in the culture as as something positive.
Yeah, and that's not something I like.
No, and that's why it's like, but it's at the same time, if you are in show business,
it serves you, yeah. It's just the whole. I've just heard from a number of different people who work with teenagers who say they want to be a YouTube celebrity or an Instagram celebrity, and that worries me when I hear stuff like that, because when I was in high school, of course, there were kids who were saying they wanted to be famous, but they wanted to be famous for an actual talent. They were singers and they wanted to get famous doing that. Whereas there are kids now who are just like, whatever, just doing whatever.
Yeah.
They don't have a skill. They just want to get on YouTube and then just hope it blows up.
Yeah.
And that's
something, that's a phenomenon of like the younger generation for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the influence that Paris Hilton and the like have had, where doesn't really have anything going for them.
No,
but got super famous.
It's so accessible, the internet, to any kid that they don't need to be a Hilton or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They could just they just have to build up subscribers and then they could make quite a bit of money. So
right, which there's the side of that helps, and this goes back to your point about there being a system that helps people in the entertainment industry, but also in the business world. I mean, if you are trying to get more customers, whether that is an audience for your comedy or customers for a service you provide, getting your name out there more and having more people aware of you because of your use of the internet, the better for your business. And so that part I can live with. But when it's just sort of, I just want a bunch of people to know who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use a skill to help others. That bothers me. That really concerns me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what will be the future of all of these YouTube stars and what the longevity is there. But I don't even know if maybe I would have been going after that too if it was available at that age. I don't know. I definitely am someone who is easily influenced and have gone through many phases in my life of being passionate and going full throttle into something, and because people around me that I was friends with were excited about a band. I don't know. I could imagine falling into it if I was that age. It must be to have a big following. I mean, I don't know. It's like it's something that we're looking for. I can only imagine how intoxicating that must be when you're young, like when you're a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I always pump the brakes when it becomes like, oh, these kids today, because honestly, every generation pretty much acts the same. It's not the age that matters. It's the tools they have.
Yeah.
Or just the world around them. So I agree with you. If YouTube and Instagram existed the way it does now when I was a teenager, I would probably be into some frivolous things too, you know? I mean, my point is just, or my concern is just that there's no discipline for some people. I mean, there are a lot of young people who are very disciplined. I mean, a 15-year-old was just in Wimbledon and beat Serena Williams, or Venus Williams. But a 15-year-old, you know?
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I haven't been following Wimbledon. I know it's going on, but that's wow.
Yeah, it's wild. And I haven't looked this up, but I don't even know if like 15 is uncommon to be in Wimbledon. It's just wild to me that there's a 15-year-old.
I mean, for sure. It seems I would have thought that they'd be in some junior league, actually.
Right. I don't know. And the headlines I saw weren't saying youngest person in Wimbledon ever beats a Williams sister. It was just that she won the match.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they didn't. Maybe just that she's the youngest doesn't trump that a Williams sister just got knocked out of Wimbledon already. But
yeah, there's two headlines there. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just wild. But, you know, I definitely am just not one of those, these millennials, because really it's not so much because they're young. It's because of how the world they were raised in.
Yeah.
And what was at their disposal. I mean, is being into a YouTube celebrity all that different than being into the cast of Friends? I don't really think so.
I mean, it's entertainment.
Right.
It's just, I don't understand it completely, but it probably just, it seems like another variation on the general theme,
right,
of being of fandom when you're young. And I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. The only thing that I think is dumb, although I understand it, is when YouTube stars get booked for live shows and, you know, because they have a following, but they have no idea how to perform on stage, you know?
Right. Right. They need a different format. And, you know, the live stage
it doesn't translate, let's say.
It doesn't translate. Yeah. They need some sort of different format than your traditional comedy show, because it's not, it doesn't work. It doesn't ever go well. And that's not incredibly different than when after Bieber posted some videos on YouTube and blew up, everybody started posting videos of themselves singing on YouTube. And then because Bieber was so big, everyone was trying to find the next Bieber. So they started just grabbing a bunch of people from the internet and putting them on television. Before they were ready, they didn't have the voice for it. They were used to singing into a laptop screen in their bedroom. They weren't used to having to project very much. And they also were used to playing alone and not playing with a band. And so I saw a number of people, I guess Lana Del Rey famously had a bad SNL performance, but I'm even thinking of other people who went on talk shows and had bad performances because they weren't ready for the stage that they were on.
Right.
That's just not setting people up for success.
No. No, absolutely not. That's just getting greedy and wanting to sell tickets. Yeah. And knowing there's a subscriber base.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, and I always go back to, even if you just care about money, you're going to do the best if you just try to make something good. And so you just have to set everybody up for success if you want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get back to talking about your comedy. One thing that I feel like I struggle with when it comes to trying to say something funny but is talking about a serious topic is making it funny. You know, I feel like I can make the serious point without it but that, you know, I feel I can easily make the serious point, but I can't then translate it into a joke. into actually working as a joke.
Right.
How do you do that?
Well, no, I'm not always successful at it, but I do, I do think it's important not to focus so much on a message and to try to find, to start from a place of something being something funny that happened. I like, for example, with stuff around Trump, I was finding comedy in just the act of the resistance and the everyday things that I was doing that were like felt like just a drop in the bucket. I like that kind of idea of how ridiculous it is, as just trying to find a way. I mean, it's kind of like the putting the key between your fingers as a self-defense mechanism. When you're up against a machine like the Koch brothers and the Republican Party and all of this.
Right.
And they've seized, power of most branches of government, or at least before the midterms for sure had. And so, you're out there marching and just the experience of being around other people and you're all kind of trying to do something to stop it. But, are you? And so I find a lot of comedy in trying to do the right thing, but not necessarily achieving it. That's like a kind of broad theme with which I approach serious topics, is my point of view of caring and the comedy that comes from trying to do good and failing. Yeah, I think that's generally it. I try not to come in so messagey. I like when the message is just kind of a bonus of the joke, but the main gist of what you're saying is something that's a joke. And I do. I mean, I talk about my relationship a lot with my wife, and that's already kind of necessarily political because I'm Jewish and she's Palestinian, and we make political jokes, but just even us, but it comes from a position, it comes from a place of these are really ultimately jokes about marriage and relationships.
Right, which is extremely relatable.
Yeah.
Because it's still just about how people relate. I mean, that's, I guess, one of the powerful things that maybe isn't stated directly when you make jokes about your relationship, but it serves this purpose of, hey, it doesn't matter if you're gay or straight or pans or whatever your gender is, whatever your sexuality is, or whatever your nationality or whatever religion you're from or a part of. You're a person, you relate to other people. We all relate to people like this. When you're living with a partner, this is just what happens to all of us. And that helps bridge a lot of gaps, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So I think people relate on those topics. And then there's like the added backdrop of the politics that adds like another layer of comedy and tension, which is really fun. Sometimes I do try to write jokes about something I'm mad about. But sometimes I can get there, but it's, cause I think that, when you're mad about something, it can be a good place to write comedy from if you're able to get enough distance from it. But that like initial passion and energy of the thing, like if you're passionate about something, and anger is a kind of a passion, is that in the world, something that you think is unjust and absurd and whatever, that can be a starting point for comedy. Sometimes it can end up in a funny place.
I think the two things that I struggle with the most, and this is maybe pretty common for a lot of people, one is when you do that thing where you just make a point, but it's not actually a joke, but you say it like it is. I don't know if I'm
I
trying
guess
to think of a good example.
that on Twitter for sure.
Oh yeah, now that definitely does happen on Twitter.
And this always translate to the stage, although I've tried here and there.
Yeah, and I think Fred Armisen had a character on SNL on Weekend Update where he would just read a headline and just be like, come on,
Right.
what's that? Like it's that sort of thing. Like that can be easier to end up doing than one might think, especially seeing that bit. But I struggle with that. And the other thing, sometimes if I do twist it into a joke, it's easy to make it a simple joke. Like, I don't know what jokes you have in regards to your religion and or you're being Jewish and your wife being Palestinian, but I haven't seen you do this, but I have seen people in the past make the sort of simple joke, the sort of like hack low-hanging fruit jokes. And those can be easier to do. Those sort of traps can be easy to fall into. What do you do to try to get around that?
I don't know. I guess I try not to go to the obvious, or if I start in an obvious place and I then and I get people on board there, then I try to take it somewhere else after. And I think I don't really have a lot of jokey jokes. I kind of sometimes wish I had more. I have definitely a few, but they all kind of still come from a personal place or experience. So I think, every observation that I have, or political joke or joke about sexuality, it's all stems from some kind of personal experience. So I think that if something's infused with the personal, and is grounded in something that happened to you, at least as a starting point, it makes it a little bit less easy to fall into a hacky trap, in the sense that it's your story. So the likelihood that someone else has the same bit is less.
Right.
Or that many people, I should say, have the same bit is less.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have this joke that I did on the Tonight Show that is what they put as the meme that they then use for promo, which is a joke about the thesaurus, stealing a thesaurus, and as a kid, or shoplifting a thesaurus, and then I say, but I felt so guilty, so remorseful, so shameful, so repentant, etc., that I returned it. And that's like a very jokey joke, but the truth is that it came from a real place, because I'm not capable of just sort of making that joke up without, because I don't typically write like one-liner jokes like that, but it came from a place of me really actually having accidentally shoplifted a thesaurus when I was a kid, because I put that in my pocket of my coat, and I had other books I was carrying, and I forgot about the one in my pocket, and so when I checked out at the cash, I paid for the other books, and then when I got to the bus stop, I put my hand in my pocket of my coat, and I found that I had the thesaurus, and so it was even, it sounds like a joke that a one-liner comedian would just invent as they sit down to write. Maybe they operate from the idea of a thesaurus and like coming up with a bunch of synonyms for something, but I can't think in those terms, so it truthfully came from a real, like, a thing that I actually did.
Yeah.
And then the joke part was like a jokey part,
Right, but that didn't feel bad jokey, like, that seems, it doesn't seem obvious, but it is that thing, I guess, when people hear it, they go like, yeah, because it's a thesaurus. That that doesn't feel cheap to me. I think, and so that's, that joke I like.
Let's talk about the jokes you don't like of mine. let's get into it. Okay, great. That's another
I
whole
did emphasize saying like that one I don't have, but I mean, I meant you versus other people I've seen.
Right.
Your stuff I like. I've seen
fucking
some
podcast though. You just get on the phone with people and you're like, these are the jokes of yours I don't like. Let's get into it.
I'm sure somebody is doing that.
Probably. Yeah.
As a podcast. And
yeah.
Boy, good luck to them.
Yeah.
I think one of the lessons to learn when it comes to especially doing the more serious material is that you do have time to sort of let things breathe a little bit. I think for me at least, if I do go for the cheaper laugh or just don't really get to anything, is because I feel like I have to make the joke quicker. But that's not as in style anymore. I think people are drawing things out a little bit to sort of appropriately set up a premise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the thing I'm learning from listening to you is that, and also seeing the comedy that's out there now, is that people don't have to rush the joke.
Right. No, and I think, you can always find small punchlines. In a longer bit, you can always find small punchlines on the way to the actual, joke that you're going for.
Right.
And to keep people engaged and at least laughing somewhat as you set things up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ideal. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we've reached the end of the episode. Now it's time for us to create something together. And
okay.
I'm trying to think what we could create together. I don't know if you have any ideas. I guess we could try to find a joke or a topic that might be serious and then see how to make it, see where to find the humor so
mm-hmm.
that it could work. Maybe we could do that.
Or we could do that unless you want to tell me a joke that you think is low-hanging fruit and we can make it better.
Oh, that's a good one
but
too.
Either way.
I don't have one offhand that's low-hanging fruit, but I do feel like I have. Well, I guess this one isn't serious, but there was one that was that I felt was maybe a little low-hanging fruit, and I asked a friend about it, and she said, "Yeah, that's a bit, maybe too front of brain or something." So that joke was that I hate when people say like jerks or bossy people say that they are type A and that's why they act the way they act.
Yeah.
And I say, you're not type A, you're type A-hole.
Right.
And so, I told that once or twice and it got laughs, but it never fully felt right. Like it did feel like, yeah, they probably could have thought of that too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you, early in comedy, I'm trying to think of an example, but I had a joke where the audience, sometimes the audience, if they yell out your punchline before you've said it, then that's a surefire way to know. It needs to be scrapped. Sometimes I have fun with something like that that's obvious, and then you can always make fun of it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll tell the audience, especially if they laugh, I'll tell them that I'm not proud of the joke, that I just said, and kind of get mad at them for going for it, Mm-hmm. I have one where I say that my mom comes from Peru and she's Jewish, which means I get my cocaine wholesale. And I hate jokes about Jews and money.
Uh-huh.
I do that one, and then I
didn't even pick up on that part of it.
No. Well, so but I like to, I have fun getting mad at them for laughing at a stereotype or whatever that I've just said,
Right.
But with the so type A-hole, I mean, I guess I don't know if there's a place to be self-deprecating about the fact that if you were type A, you would have written a better punchline for that joke.
That's funny.
I don't
And
know.
what if
Yeah.
what if you can you do the thing where it's like, or is this a joke where someone could do the thing where they anticipate the audience sort of seeing it coming and then go a different direction? Like instead of like, oh, that's not type A, that's type A dick.
Right.
It seems like that wouldn't do as well because you're essentially you're setting up an expectation.
Right.
And it's not enough time to really set up the anticipation of saying a hole.
Yeah. I mean, unless it just you don't do it with type A, unless you don't use A at all.
Right.
You just say, you just give a much longer answer of the kind descriptive of the kind of person that they are, you know?
Right.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
I don't take responsibility for my own actions because it's easier to blame it on a psychological diagnosis that, you know, what is overused. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
I see it.
In a different, like if you could find a funnier description of who that person really is. I don't know. That's the counter.
No, that's a good one too.
Point. I don't know. Yeah.
I like it.
I've never tried to write jokes like this before on Skype.
No, there's so many different moves that people can make, and sometimes I hit a wall when it's just like, I'm just not witty enough, I guess, or I'm not clever enough to like. I know the moves that people are making, but I don't know how to use the moves so well.
But it's also that there are there's a finite number of moves usually, and sometimes we don't see them all. But also, there are actually fewer than maybe there appear because it depends what your voice is and what kind of punchline makes sense in the style of your act. You know, so if it might work for someone to say. A-hole, type A-hole, might not work for someone else to say that, you know? So yeah, some things, it depends, what works coming from you in the context of your point of view and your voice and style of jokes, I think, is something I've started, you know, now after a little while now, like at the beginning, I had a friend who, she continues to be further ahead in comedy than me, but would say like, oh, but this isn't the kind, I have all these jokes, but they're not jokes that I would really work in my act. And I was like, what do you mean, like work in your act? Like, you know, don't you like just have any jokes? Like, isn't any, like having jokes just good? Like, isn't that enough, you know? But now I kind of do understand that there are certain things that just don't fit, you know, and would be better served being said by somebody else. A lot of stuff with my wife, because some things are shared experiences. It's like, well, is it funnier coming from you as a Palestinian woman, or is it funnier coming from me as the Jewish person in the relationship, or the white woman, or the, you know, or just is it funnier coming from you because you're this kind of personality type and I'm this kind of personality type. So I think that's something to consider too, in terms of the different moves that you make or potentially could make with a joke.
Yeah. Well, there it is. Jessica, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Have not had a chance to use that joke yet. I'm going to do it later this week. I'm going to do stand-up for my comedy birthday. And I can't believe it's been 10 years since I started doing comedy. You would think I'd be a lot better at it by now. But there's someone who's really great at it, Jess Salomon. If you are in Montreal or heading that way, on July 22nd at the Just for Laughs Festival, Jess and her wife will be taping a comedy special of their duo, the El-Salomons, and the special will be for the Canadian streaming service Crave. And they'll be doing their show in Toronto in September for Just for Laughs 42. And don't forget to follow her on social media at Jess_Salomon and her cartoon account with her wife, the El-Salomons. Links in bio. You can also follow us, Twitter and Facebook, at ThereItIsPod. So please do it. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.